the tech people who run this entire thing. Yes. Can you hear me well enough if I stand here? Great. So today I'll be talking to you about some work related to generating language descriptions. This is work, and I'm with Harvard Medical School with the High Dive Lab under Neil Scalenborg. And so we published this work last year in bioinformatics, and I'll talk to you a bit about that work and all the things that we've done with it since then. And so this work positions itself in the field of a grammar of graphics, which is essentially, very briefly, the idea that we can construct visualizations in the classical way, where you can say, you know, oh, I want a bar chart, and I get a bar chart. But we can also construct this in a more structured way, where we might say that I want a bin genomic axis and with a quantitative y-axis and a rectangular mark, and that will also give me the same visualization of a bar chart. So we will still perceive this as a bar chart. And so our lab previously created a tool for genomics visualizations to make like these structured visualizations. It's called Gosling. It's a very expressive, interactive visualization tool. And just to show you a little bit of what it can do, it can create a lot of cool different plots, link a lot of different things, and mainly be interactive to really allow for data exploration. There is also an online editor that you can change some features in directly, and it will update on the fly. So that's pretty neat, and that's really great. But what if you cannot see the visualization? And so we started thinking about this because there's quite some people that are either blind or visually impaired. About 3.4% of the world. We don't really know how many people in the genomics workforce. There's no data on that, but we know that about 27%. Of people in general have a disability, at least in the US, and about 3.4% in the genomic workforce. So from that, we can kind of estimate how many people would perhaps be blind in this field. And essentially, for visualizations, there are different ways or strategies to make these more accessible to everyone. And one of the ways that we do this is through alternative text. So a lot of biomedical research rely on these visualizations, and we can make these a little bit more inclusive by providing this alternative text. And these are essentially descriptions of the visualization that are included with the visualization so that someone can still access this, for example, through a screen reader, which is like an assistive device that someone can use to get the information that's on the web page read out. But the thing is that these alternative text descriptions are often pre-written. Like when you create the visualizations, you also write this and then you put it on the web page, which is great, except if you have if you generate visualizations or if they're interactive, which means that they update on the fly. So you need kind of a little bit of a different approach of automatically generating these. And so we thought, okay, that's great, but we have this grammar of graphics. Essentially, we have a lot of information contained in this specification that we then turn into this visualization. That's the whole point of this tool. But because we have so much information in this specification, perhaps we can convert that in some type of alternative text description. So that's exactly what we did, and that's this tool called Alt-Gosling that I'll be telling you about today, where we converted these specifications into alternative text descriptions. And there's some other approaches that we can use to create text descriptions. So there's some image recognition models that I'll talk to you a little bit later. There's also some other tools that kind of approach this, but the main issue is that they're usually either limited to particular data dimensionality or particular data types, which means that they're not really suited for genomics data, which is why we created the new tool. And there's this one tool, Ollie, that I'll talk to you a little bit about more what kind of approach they did. But let's take a step back first, because what do we even put in this description? How do we even write this? So there are guidelines on this, luckily. The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines are really massive guidelines that give a lot of information about what to put or how to make the web more accessible, and they also talk about these alternative text description, but they don't really mention a lot about what they call complex visualization, which is probably every single visualization that we deal with in the space of biomedical data. They only say that you really need a two-part description of a short alt text and a longer description. And so there's this one other paper that does kind of go into what do you actually put in these descriptions. And essentially they made this semantic model of 4 levels where they say that we have a base level of elemental and encoded properties. Then we have I don't have a mouse here. Okay. Then we have like statistical and relational information. We have perceptual and cognitive information, and we have domain-specific information. And then if we have a visualization and we have some alternative text description like this, we can actually kind of mark what part is like what kind of level of inscription. So kind of we can construct these visualization by combining these different levels to really try to and capture what's even in this visualization. And so I'll talk to you briefly about some of the considerations that we had to go through to create this tool. I cannot talk to you about everything, unfortunately, because of time, but feel free to ask me. But one of the things that we really had to talk about is like compositions. So this Gosling tool, as I showed you some examples earlier, is like super expressive to create a lot of different type of visualization with a lot of views and tracks, and you can link a lot of things. But that also kind of raises the question of like what even is a chart in this sense. And so in Gosling, we have this principle of a view and a track, and we can have like one view and one track, like the left top that I'm showing here. That might be what we might call a chart. Like we're seeing this, we're perceiving this as a chart, but we can also overlay multiple tracks, which still might be a chart, or we can add them together with a lot of space between them or with not a lot of space between them. And kind of what we perceive as a chart isn't really defined in that way. Like if we have a composite of a lot of different visualizations, it's sometimes hard to figure out what is a chart. So we had to kind of find out some way of figuring out what even people are perceiving as a chart. And then one other thing that we really were thinking about is again, this idea of chart types with this grammar of graphics. Essentially, we have this grammar of graphics idea where we're kind of moving away from this construction of a bar chart, but more to this grammar of graphics approach. But the thing is that if you try to convey to someone what kind of visualization we have, we really like using these terms that we already described, right? Because it's a lot faster to tell someone, oh, I have a bar chart than, oh, I have a bin to genomic X's and a quantitative Y X's and all that kind of stuff. So in some ways, we really want to use these terms of charts that we already have. And so we're kind of moving back to this classical approach. And so we try to essentially identify different chart types. You don't really need to read this table that I'm showing here, but essentially the idea is that we try to set up all of these rules to try to infer these kind of chart types. And so, like, if I take, for example, this as like a gene annotation image with like 6 different tracks, for example, and I try to convert that in some description, then that can become a super long description that no one really wants to read super fast. So we have to think about a way to kind of actually show this. And that's why we thought of kind of creating this interactive navigable text, which is similar to Ollie, which kind of was developed at the same time as we were working on this, where they also kind of thought about the same problem, where essentially they created this like tree interactive text where you can navigate through descriptions, and we thought that would also be a really good idea. So what we essentially did is in total, we take the specification from this Gosling, and we take the data that is rendered in Gosling, which creates this interactive visualization, and we output this together into this new specification, the old Gosling specification. And from this, we essentially create 3 outputs. The short alt text, the longer text description, which is like this really long, flat-out description that it's kind of hard to work with, and then this tree structure description. So you can actually kind of navigate through it. And so we also wanted to see if this actually is useful. So one thing that we did, super important in the entire process, is we co-designed this with a blind individual, and we also tested it with him to really make sure that it was useful to start with. And then we also tested it, or like kind of saw what other tools do, so some image-based algorithms as well as some LLMs, to kind of see what is really going on and how does this compare. And it's kind of hard to compare this in general, but essentially first we set up some representative visualizations to kind of test this on. And then I want to show you kind of how this interface looks like. So essentially we have the Gosling visualization as we would have, and then we have some panels underneath this that you can navigate through to kind of see this visualization or get the information from this, as well as a separate data panel to have more information on the data, because we can still interact with the visualization. We can zoom, we can pan, we can do other types of interactions, and the data will be updating. So it's easy to kind of be able to directly go to that. So I want to show and let you hear an example of what this would look like with a screen reader. So I have a little video that you can hear what you can hear if you navigate through this with a screen reader. Just a heads up that it might go a little bit faster than you may expect. So hope this really works.
Automatic description closed. Automatic description open. Level 1. Title closed. 1 of 4. Title open. Level 2. Tonsil C HIP dash the following in TH1 cells. 1 of 1. Level 1. Title open. 1 of 4. Title closed. Chart type closed. Appearance closed. Data table closed. Appearance closed. Appearance open. 3 of 4.
Okay, so that goes on for a bit more, but that kind of gives you an idea of, I hope, of kind of how people interact with this and, yeah, what kind of information. And perhaps from this, you can already gather, if you don't use a screen reader regularly, that if you have that really long text that I mentioned earlier, that it's very hard to go through that and kind of construct your mental idea of what this visualization even looks like. Okay, so then we compared it to some other like options because, you know, we have a lot of great models at this point, and I think this entire conference really focuses on AI applications. But we tried to see, you know, is this actually good enough to, like, do we even need this tool, or can we just generate these descriptions on the go already? So one of the things that we compared it to is this Amazon recognition tool. Amazon recognition is, I'm sorry, it's a little bit small, but it's like 93% sure that this is a chart. It's probably also a plot and probably also a bar chart, but it doesn't really give us a lot more information. Similar for Google Cloud Vision API, it's able to tell us with 83% certainty that it's a font or a parallel or a rectangle or a screenshot. Again, not super useful perhaps, but again, it gives you an idea of what these tools do. This alttext.ai is a bit better. It says that it's a bar chart showing ChIP-seq data of TH1 cells across 22 human chromosomes. It probably didn't see that there was like 23rd chromosome on the x-axis, and then the y-axis represents the signal intensity. So it's already a bit better. And then GPT-4o is actually able to give us quite a reasonable description. They're able to tell us that it's a bar chart with a title and an x-axis and all that kind of stuff. But the main issue with GPT-4o, and that's not this example, but if you get these really longer descriptions, you again get this super long text that is kind of hard to interact with, as well as, yeah, what we've probably all are at this point familiar with is GPT it's very nice at hallucination. So it sometimes also really creates things that aren't there or yeah, are kind of wrong. So that's kind of like what we did at this point for this tool as an accessibility measure. But what we realized is that essentially, okay, we have this specification, we have this visualization, we have this text. Really what we're creating is this multimodal resource. And we can do a lot more with that than just generating alternative descriptions for blind people, for example. And so I want to take you through two things that we briefly did so far and that we're working on. One is this visualization search retrieval, and this other is this data question visualization generation project. And so first, regarding visualization search retrieval. So searching for visualization is kind of hard because usually we search by text, but we're trying to find images, and those aren't really aligned. They're kind of represented in different ways, so that can be hard. But because we're kind of linking these modalities, we might be able to create this in a better way. So what we did is we set up this multimodal database where we have the specification, the images, and then the text descriptions. And what we did is we thought, okay, Gosling is really well at like getting this information out of these specifications, but it's not really well at like creating nice language. And ChatGPT is able to make nice language. So maybe we can combine this in a way. So we essentially set up this database where we take all of these like specifications and create images and text descriptions, and then we can do stuff with that. So very briefly, like we set up this model where we can kind of connect all of these modalities and try to find images, for example, through text. So we did this top K retrieval strategy to see if this actually worked. And one thing that's interesting to notice is that if we add the LLM, it's slightly better than just the Gosling only variant. And then we also built the search interface, but I won't say too much more about this because if you stay for a bit longer, in about 2 hours, you can hear a lot more about this project. So that's great. And then this other project that we were now currently working on with 2 interns in the lab is this data question visualization generation. So essentially the idea is like, okay, we can perhaps combine like a lot of visualization questions with visualizations, because we might want to, like, for example, use this in, let's say, a model where we want to ask questions regarding particular data sources, and then we can already link these to visualizations. So we're creating this entire database, or the interns in our lab creating this database to add like these questions to to get these question visualization pairs. And we also want to add essentially outghosting as this extra layer to it. So we just have like a more rich database that we can then train models on. So in general, we created this method for improving the accessibility in genomics visualizations. It's definitely an improvement over the current state, because the current state is, unfortunately, in many cases, nothing. So in that way, it's a lot easier to be better. But yeah, it's also proves to be a little bit more interesting than some of these other models. And one thing to also note is that, for example, if we create this really big data set with all of these questions, then it's also actually very nice for us that it's like a deterministic non-LLM based model, because otherwise we would, like, if we have 200,000 questions I just heard from this one data set, then, that would create a lot of tokens. It would be costly and also inefficient to create, whereas we can now just create this with the deterministic algorithm. So that's great. We can add a bit more on kind of like type of descriptions and also on user study. But in general, we're kind of working on building this multimodal resource. And if you want to know more about this, please talk to me or read our paper. This also links to the GitHub, to the NPM package, to the PyPI package, to documentation, all the links there. And if you are scanning this QR code, you can also scan this QR code, which tells you more about me. I'm looking for a PhD position, so if you have something interesting, please talk to me. That would be great. Other than that, we work a lot more on other accessibility work. That we also present this tutorial at ISMB, which is really nice. But yeah, talk to me if you want to talk more about this. And with that, I really want to thank you for your time and having me here.
Work perfectly to time. So we are going to have a quick changeover, but whilst we're doing the changeover, we can take at least one question. Do you have, oh, excellent.
So thanks, great work. I'm just wondering a little bit about, I have not been working with blind people, but I think, isn't it a detour going via a visual and then to the blind people? Because I think we are putting so much effort when we are doing visualization to make things visually perceptual, and then we are going kind of the step back instead of having something that is directly built on the analysis results and transforms this into language.
Yeah, you really hit the nail on the head there, where we're really wondering kind of what is kind of the approach that we've been doing. So we're really going back to what do we even use visualizations for? And you're right that essentially we're taking this detour of like we use visualizations to convey messages and to allow people to interact with the data, right? Is there a different way where we can do this that might not have to go through the visualization? And the thing is that at this point we don't really know what would be a better approach in that sense. Also want to highlight that this is not just for, let's say, 100% blind people. Most people that are within the blind and visually impaired have like visual impairment, where you might have less sight, but you can still see some things. But using a screen reader will just help on getting that information. But yeah, really we can think a lot more about like how do we represent things, and do we even need the visualizations for this? Yeah. So thank you very much, and we can chat later as well if you want.
Thank you.
Thank Thomas again, and.